bring in Andrew DiCecco. He's in the locker room and can give us some more take on this. Yesterday he was asked that question. And look, I don't know if this is a make or break thing of the season here, whether Gainwell gets carries or Scott gets carries or Rashad Penny gets carries. But there's something going on with the run game. As Jeff Kerr tweeted out earlier, Andrew, only 2.7 yards per carry since week 4 for Gainwell. Do you think they're using him? Let's start there. Do you think they're using Gainwell correctly?
No, I mean, I think that he is best equipped to be a second or third piece in a rushing attack. I certainly think he has a role, but I think overutilizing him really diminishes his efficiency and effectiveness. And right now, I think the Eagles lean really heavily in Kenny Gainwell, and I don't know if that's correct, knowing that you have someone like Rashad Penny who can be a volume runner. Boston Scott, I think, deserves a bigger role in a little larger piece of the pie there. I think that they're just overly reliant on Kenny Gainwell when I think he should be used a little bit more situationally, even more so than he already is.
Yeah, so do you have any thoughts or a hypothesis in your mind why Penny is out of it? Now, do you think he just can't play anymore? He's shot. He's got nothing left in the tank. If that was the case, I would think they would cut him.
Yeah, I don't know that would be the case. If he didn't have anything left and he flat out couldn't play anymore, well, then they're not going to allocate a precious spot on the 53-man roster just to keep him there because they like him. You know what I mean? It's something to the effect of, I think maybe pass protection. Maybe they're trying to preserve him a little bit. The other guys have clearly defined roles, and he really doesn't. And I mean, imagine it's almost like you're getting a player via trade late in the season, because if you're able to take the bubble wrap off of him late in the year and all of a sudden you have a power running game in the cold weather and you're already this high-octane offense, well, I think that just completely transforms your offense. And I think he will play into the equation later in the season, but right now there's just not really a role for him, and he does have an extensive injury history.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'll also say this. When we saw him in the preseason and when we saw him that very briefly Monday Night Football appearance, he doesn't seem to have a lot of juice left, but I think that he can provide an asset into the short running game and not having to overly rely on Jalen Hurts to pick up those yards and short down and distance.
Yeah, and, we talked earlier is, to me, I don't see what you think. You got Swift, you got Gainwell, and you got Scott. You got three guys who essentially would be similar. They don't have a guy who does something different. Now, you might say, well, Penny doesn't really have, he doesn't play special teams. He doesn't catch the ball all that well. He doesn't block all that well. All right, well, he still does something differently than the other guys. He's 220 pounds. He averaged 6 yards a carry. He's a more physical back. He's got more explosion. If you want someone to catch the ball, if you want someone to play special teams, you want someone to block, use Scott on special teams. Use Scott to block. Use Swift to catch the ball. You can use a different style of back and carve out a different role from him. It feels to me, I like Gainwell. I just think they're using him the wrong way.
Yeah, and you know what? Rashad Penny can play special teams. He was a prolific college kick returner, and he has caught the ball. He caught the ball, I believe, in the preseason, and he just simply wasn't asked to do that in Seattle's offense. But I remember when he signed here and he was asked that question, he said, yeah, I can do it. I just really wasn't asked to do it. So, but I think that they obviously have a pecking order, and they like the three guys above him more. And I think if they were to get in the short yardage situation they need to rely on a running back, I think that Boston Scott would be somebody that they would go to in that situation, in a must-have situation, if they don't want to put Jalen Hurts in harm's way. And for some reason, they think Kenny Gainwell is someone that has a really good spatial awareness and can kind of burrow his way for these first downs, and they really trust him in pass protection to catch the ball. And situationally, obviously, he fumbled inside the 5-yard line, so they have a lot of trust in him, and to do that and put the ball on the carpet in that moment, you have to wonder if you're going to see something different, a different shakeup, despite what you heard yesterday.
Yeah, I'm talking with Andrew DiCecco, Football at 4, brought to you by Bet365. Andrew, let's look at some matchups here. Obviously the secondary. CeeDee Lamb, not a great cast of guys in terms of production, but they do have some talent, Gallup and Ferguson and obviously Brandon Cooks here. So how does the Eagles secondary, which, they gave up 10 points. They had a really good game against Tyreek Hill in Miami. Last week almost gave up 400 yards. So Jekyll and Hyde, although interestingly enough, the talent in the secondary against Miami was different than the talent in the secondary against Washington here. So how do you see this week that matchup?
Well, I think Slay and Bradbury are both going to be tested vertically from Michael Gallup and Brandon Cooks. And I think in the slot, that's where CeeDee Lamb primarily resides. You're going to see the similar combination of Eli Ricks and Sidney Brown to sort of man that. I don't think that you're going to suddenly see James Bradbury reinserted there and potentially make yourself more vulnerable in two spots. But I mean that they're going to look. The proof's in the pudding that there's a clear blueprint in how to attack the Eagles' short to intermediate levels of the field, and it's not just limited to the slot corner or to the outside corner. I thought the linebackers, Mike, really got exploited last week, particularly Nakobe Dean. Zach Cunningham, to me, has been their best linebacker this year, but I thought Nicholas Morrow. I mean, they've all gotten beat in the pass game, and I think it's a group effort. The second and third level have been exploited, and I think Dallas is going to look to do that. But I mean, I think the front. I have a funny feeling, a sneaky suspicion that they're not going to get shut out 2 weeks in a row, not until the fourth quarter when you see a Hassan Reddick sack. I think they're going to provide a lot more pressure on Dak Prescott, and this strikes me as a Josh Sweat week. I think he's due, and you're going to see a whole different. I think it's going to completely transform their game plan because he's going to have to get the ball out a lot quicker, and that kind of plays into what the Eagles defensive backs are able to do, and that's really anticipate the throws and jump on some of those routes.
Now, AD, we just talked about the running backs, but the Eagles should be able to run the ball this week. Do you think they can and will with this line against Dallas? A lot of times when we've seen them succeed against Dallas, they've run at Micah Parsons.
Yeah, I think they will, and the Eagles have done a great job of keeping Micah Parsons in a bind and finding ways to neutralize him, and I think you're going to continue to see that. It's a proven remedy to combat such a transformative player in Micah Parsons, and I think they're going to continue to run the ball with success. I think you're going to see a lot of DeAndre Swift, but I also think Gainwell will be a factor in this game plan, but I think you may see a little bit more Boston Scott. I feel like you might see more of a three-man rotation rather than a primary two-headed rushing attack, and maybe give him a little bit more burn on offense because he can also threaten as a receiver out of the backfield as well. So I think they're going to try and throw three different guys at him and see if Dallas is able to stop it.
All right, Andrew DiCecco, I want to take a look at one area where the Eagles have obviously been interesting, and we talked about the past, the Dak Prescott. I think they said the last 3 games against Philly, he's averaged 44 points against Philly, 80% completion. We've seen so many teams go with the short, quick passes. Sam Howell last week, almost 400 yards in that. So you take a look at, is that a linebacker thing? Is that a safety thing? Why is it the short, quick pass been something that Philly has struggled with, and specifically against this Dallas team?
Well, it's a group effort, right? I mean, pass rush and coverage work hand in hand, and when the pass rush isn't getting home, you're allowing quarterbacks to sit back there and hit their first read and get some of those guys in space. And, I mean, look, it's easy to pinpoint the slot corner or this safety's out of position. It's a group effort. All those guys have taken turns getting beat last week. Reed, Blankenship, James Bradbury, who's normally a really short cover corner, one of the best in the business. He got beat for 2 touchdowns. Sidney Brown got beat for a touchdown, 41 yards and a touchdown. Eli Ricks hasn't really been tested, but he's looked really well. He's acquitted himself quite well when he has been in there. I think his snap share is going to continue to rise as it has in the recent weeks. It's just a group effort. I think that all those guys have taken their share of the blame, and when your front's not getting home, that allows quarterbacks to sit there and pick you apart. So I think it's paramount that they find a way to pressure Dak and move him off his spot.
All right, Andrew, when you look at these two teams, obviously Philly 7-1, 5-2 Dallas up and down. When they're great, they're great. Then they've lost to Arizona. What to you separates these two teams at this stage of the season?
I mean, I have the Eagles clearly above Dallas, and Dallas is too Jekyll and Hyde, right? I think that they've looked dominant at times and they've fallen on their face and really haven't lived up to expectations certain weeks. So I have the Eagles above them, and then there's a significant gap, but you can't discredit the Dallas Cowboys. They have the talent on that team to really strike at any moment, and this is a game where the Eagles are going to have to. They're not a performance like they had against the Commanders isn't going to be enough to get it done against the Dallas Cowboys. They have a better defense and a more efficient offense that whereas the Commanders had an offense that needed to play perfectly and couldn't ill afford a turnover, which we saw. They needed to play perfect to keep pace with the Eagles, whereas Dallas has a much more well-rounded team. So the Eagles are going to have to rise to the occasion Sunday afternoon.
We'll see. Is it going to be a blowout? A lot of these games have been blowouts between the Eagles and the Cowboys. A lot of times, Hurts has not played against Prescott. It has been the backup against somebody. They'll play Hurts, Prescott, Sunday, 4:25 right here on 97.3 ESPN. He's Andrew DiCecco from InsideTheBirds.com. And, of course, he's here on Football at 4. Thanks, Andrew.
You got it. Talk soon.